Happy Friday, everyone. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee in Seoul. Before we get started, here's a look at today's highlights. Samsung Electronics seems to have recovered fully from its Galaxy Note 7 recall, estimating its biggest ever quarterly profits in the April to June period. Trade is expected to be one of the issues that's going to be in the spotlight as G20 leaders kick off their Hamburg summit on Friday amid growing trade protectionism worldwide. These stories and more coming right up. Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics' second quarter profits likely rose to a new record high. Already the world's largest smartphone maker, Samsung is also poised to overtake Intel as the world's largest semiconductor manufacturer. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
Samsung Electronics looks set to record its largest quarterly profits in the company's 48-year history. The South Korean tech giant on Friday posted its earnings estimate for the second quarter of this year, putting its operating profit at $12.1 billion, up 72% on year. This beats the market consensus of $11.4 billion and surpasses Apple's profit for this quarter, estimated at $10 billion. Samsung sales revenue is expected to hit $51.8 billion, 18.6% higher than the previous quarter. Market watchers say the record numbers are largely down to the company's skyrocketing memory chip sales this year, backed by a rapid increase in unit prices. In fact, Samsung is expected to overtake Intel as the global market leader in semiconductor sales this quarter. Healthy sales of its new flagship smartphone, the Galaxy S8, are also believed to have boosted the figures, as well as growing orders for Samsung's flexible OLED panels. Analysts don't see the margin eroding anytime soon. They say Samsung is blazing ahead of its competitors in terms of memory technology as well as displays, both of which are core components of emerging technologies, such as augmented and virtual reality, cloud computing, and Internet of Things.
Profits are likely to continue growing in the third quarter, topping $12.9 billion. As chip prices are expected to rise even more, and increased shipments of flexible OLED displays will also be reflected in the upcoming earnings. Samsung's mobile division may also see a boost with the release of its new Galaxy Note smartphones.
Total profits for 2017 are projected to surpass $42 billion, which would go down in the history books as another record high. Oh Soo-young, Business Daily.
LG Electronics also released its earnings guidance for the second quarter, which fell below market expectations. Revenues came to $12.6 billion, a drop of 0.7% from the previous quarter. Operating profits also shrank by almost 30% at $575 million. Market watchers attribute the disappointing figures to hefty marketing costs for the G6 smartphone and other product releases. The rising unit cost of panel displays also dragged down the company's margins. Still, analysts point out that both sales and profits grew compared to the same period last year, and that better performance in vehicle components could boost future earnings. Despite robust earnings reports, the Korean equity market was mostly sluggish in the last trading day of the week. To give us a wrap-up of this week's stock market action, we have our Business Daily's markets contributor, Choi Jin-seok, joining us on the phone today. Hello, Jin-seok.
Thanks for having me, June.
All right, so how did the market perform today and for the entire week?
Both the Kospi and the Kosdaq market didn't move much in the last session of the week. The Kospi fell by 0.33% to close at 2379.87, while the Kosdaq followed with a 0.02 point downtick to close at 663. The Kospi market opened the session with a downtick, once falling to as low as 2376. Overnight, the U.S. market posted sharp declines with key tech shares all falling. This affected the overall sentiment of the Kospi and triggered stock selling by foreign investors. A mixed picture was seen among sectors. Insurance, construction, and steel enjoyed gains, while distribution, banks, chemicals, and food and beverage were sluggish. On a weekly basis, the Kospi fell slightly, while the Kosdaq plummeted by almost 1%. In particular, small to mid-cap stocks put in a weak performance. Foreign investors sold massive amounts of shares on the Kospi, while both retail investors and institutions were net buyers for the week. By sector, steel, non-metal materials, insurance, and utilities performed strongly, while consumer staples, shipping, and communications were sluggish.
Samsung Electronics reported record earnings today, but the market showed a somewhat muted reaction. Now, what were the reasons for that?
Right. First of all, expectations of robust earnings might have already been priced in, which could explain the sharp rally in recent days. Second, concerns over weak earnings of non-tech firms still remain in the market. Experts also say what's more important in the near term is whether global economic indicators can show improvements or oil prices can rebound. Related events are lined up as well, including a U.S. jobs report later tonight and China's price index and trade data next week. However, experts still project Samsung's positive quarterly results will lead foreign investors to buy shares as early as next week. And experts also say the company's earnings report is likely to help mitigate overvaluation concerns in the Kospi market.
Then how did the other Asian markets fare throughout this week?
Manufacturing data, both from the government and a private institution, showed improvements, and this helped lift sentiment in the Shanghai market. The Shanghai Composite Index was up 0.6% for the week at the end of Thursday, and the index surpassed 3,200. Even today, the Shanghai market recovered from early losses, closing above 3,200. The Japanese market has mostly been flat, with the yen being rather stable throughout the week. However, geopolitical risks hurt the overall sentiment, and the sluggish U.S. market didn't help the index in Tokyo as well. The Nikkei 225 index was a lone bright spot, rebounding in the late hours to erase morning losses of nearly 0.7%. This has been Choi Jin-seok for Business Daily.
The two-day G20 summit kicks off in Hamburg on Friday under the slogan of Shaping an Interconnected World. Key issues include climate change, counterterrorism, North Korea, as well as trade. Our Nuara reports.
Climate change and trade are agenda items which US President Donald Trump will most likely be confronted with during the gathering after he pulled America out of the Paris Climate Accord and announced protectionist trade policies. On climate change, the leaders are likely to spur stronger determination on trying to tackle global warming and cut greenhouse emissions. On trade, they are likely to forge a number of deals, most of which will likely take place during separate sideline meetings. The group of 20 nations account for 80% of the world's GDP, 3/4 of global commerce, and 2/3 of the Earth's population. Another major issue will be terrorism, of which the leaders will show strong determination to eradicate it. Also, there will be efforts to boost global stability and peace, especially in the midst of North Korea's relentless military provocations. South Korean President Moon Jae-in is planning to present a reasonable solution to this and urge participants to adopt it in a joint statement. However, some of the leaders are being greeted by anti-capitalist protesters who are holding up banners reading "Welcome to Hell." They are blaming G20 for failing to solve many of the issues threatening world peace. But these rallies turned violent a day before the gathering kicks off, with dozens of police and protesters being injured after they clashed. Police fired water cannons and tear gas, while protesters hurled bottles and other projectiles. After things got violent, organizers did cancel the march, but many stayed behind as the chaos continued, with some shops and vehicles being destroyed. What sparked the riot is not yet known, but police had anticipated that some demonstrators would turn violent. About 100,000 protesters are said to take part in rallies during the course of the summit, and about 12,000 are said to have attended Thursday's march. Noaram, Business Daily.
So, with the G20 leaders soon to meet to discuss global challenges, our Kim Hae-sung gives us a preview of the summit and a breakdown of the top agendas from experts' perspectives.
Shaping an interconnected world, that's the theme of the G20 summit set to begin on Friday in the German city of Hamburg. The three main agendas set by the host country are building resilience, improving sustainability, and assuming responsibility. Those are divided into 15 subtopics, including trade, investment, climate and energy, income inequality, and immigration. All of them in the pursuit of stable, sustainable economic growth.
Since the 2008 global financial crisis, the global economy has recovered somewhat. Now the US and EU are ready to start tapering their monetary policies. Both China and Japan are still in expansion mode. At the summit, member countries will likely discuss their different macroeconomic policies, address overcapacity issues, like in Chinese steel, and discuss measures to prevent rising protectionism.
Promoting free trade and a liberal international order has long been the mission of the G20. But according to the WTO, 42 new trade restrictive measures were applied by G20 economies between October 2016 and May 2017, an average of 6 measures per month, slightly higher than in 2016. With U.S. President Donald Trump pushing for an America First policy and calling for existing free trade agreements to be renegotiated, member countries are likely heading for a clash. This lack of consensus was seen in March at the G20 financial ministers and central bank governors meeting. The members' communique at the end replaced the usual phrase, resist all forms of protectionism, with a watered-down version. We're working to strengthen the contribution of trade to our economies. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, however, vowed last week to European leaders that the EU will present a united front at the G20 in favor of free trade.
My goal, therefore, is that the G20 summit sends a clear signal for open markets and against barriers, as well as a clear commitment to a multilateral trade system.
Trade within Europe is big. Upholding liberal trade policies is critical for the EU's economic and political survival. If President Trump opposes liberal trade policies, then the roles of Europe and China, their leadership, will grow even bigger at the summit.
The second main agenda is climate change, which the group sees as an issue that needs to be tackled for sustainable growth. G20 leaders are expected to push for the implementation of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That agreement, however, was dealt a major blow when President Trump took America out of it.
Sustainable energy has long been a critical issue for Germany. Merkel has played an important role in coming up with the Paris Climate Agreement. A high level of commitment to the Paris deal is unlikely, but countries are expected to at least reaffirm their commitment to environmental issues at the level of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development.
The Hamburg summit also incorporates numerous socio-political issues ranging from women's empowerment, immigration, digitalization, fighting terror, and supporting Africa. The agenda is designed to make growth inclusive and address the criticism that globalization and free trade have left some behind.
The G20 summit discusses a range of issues, so it's difficult to expect the countries together to come up with specific policies. The real policies come from bilateral talks on the sidelines, especially with changes in global leadership, like in the US, France, and of course, Korea. The upcoming summit will provide an opportunity for leaders to meet and boost mutual understanding. One of the topics will be North Korea.
Just like the theme of this year's G20 summit, the world has become more interconnected than ever, with issues like trade, climate, and immigration no longer confined to one country or one region. The agenda is ambitious and the world is watching. But with major differences among the members, compromise could prove elusive. Kim Hae-sung, Business Daily.
Korea's population aging rapidly due to a low birth rate could deal a heavy blow to the country's economic growth in 10 years' time. According to a new report from the Bank of Korea, Korea's annual growth rate could drop to 0.4% in 2026. The gloomy projection is mainly attributed to a dramatic increase in the elderly population and not enough young people to fill the labor gap. The annual growth rate between now and 2026 is expected to remain under 2%. With the continuous rise in household debt, the government hopes long-term income stability will provide the key to easing the national debt burden. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
1.1 trillion US dollars. That's what Korea's household debt amounted to at the end of the first quarter this year. $6.3 billion were added in April and $8.7 billion in May, plus, with that of June, and total accrued debt amounts to roughly $1.2 trillion at the end of the second quarter. Given that national net income was $1.1 trillion last year, this amount would still not be enough to cover Korea's total outstanding household debt.
I think the amount is too large compared to our current GDP. This is preventing consumption and, in turn, impeding sustainable growth for the economy.
Choi thinks household debt issues should be resolved by income-led growth, a stance in line with President Moon Jae-in's fiscal proposals to tackle debt. He adds that creating more quality jobs is the ultimate solution to help people repay their debt by boosting income.
For the repayment of debt, income needs to be either maintained or improved. I believe the government's economic policy should focus on this.
Other issues that are in need of urgent review include regulations surrounding internet-only banks, the separation of financial policy and supervisory functions, and the reduction of fees for credit card transactions. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
With the global economy slowly recovering, the market for luxury goods has been steadily growing. Coupled with the rapidly expanding middle class in China, the luxury goods market is now thriving. Here's our Elliot Kim with more.
Based on constant exchange rates, the market for personal luxury goods is expected to grow by a stronger than expected 2 to 4% in 2017. This is according to a study by global consultancy group Bain & Co. and Altagamma Global, a trade association of Italian luxury brands. Revenues in 2017 are expected to exceed the total from last year, which was at $279 billion US dollars, with sales growth in Europe and China outweighing lower spending in the US and Southeast Asia. Projected revenues this year are seen at a range between $284 and $289 billion.
Bain & Company were very optimistic about the future of luxury. We believe that the fundamentals for growth are really there. There will be an increase in high net worth individuals. There will be more appetite for luxury products everywhere in the world. So we're really very positive.
Europe is expected to spearhead this year's growth, with sales already up 7 to 9% so far, with Spain being a particularly bright spot, spurred on by tourist perceptions that it's a relatively safe European destination.
Europe is definitely the champion of this renewed growth. It seems that the impact of terrorism has faded a little bit. Tourists are back. Spain is taking advantage of this the most.
Mainland China has also rebounded, posting a 6 to 8% growth.
So China as a market represents 7 to 8% of the total retail sales. The Chinese, however, represent 25% of the sales globally. And we believe that this number will continue to grow. By 2025, they should represent 35% of the total market.
The luxury goods market is expected to expand by 3 to 4% annually, reaching $315 to $325 billion US dollars by 2020, driven by China's growing middle class and recovery in more mature markets. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
Time now for a look at some of the top business headlines from this week with our Eunice Kim joining us in the studio today. Hello, Eunice.
Hello.
All right, so we're going to take a look at a political crisis unfolding in the Middle East involving a coalition led by Saudi Arabia versus Qatar.
That's right, June. This is turning out to be a major diplomatic row pitting Qatar with other Gulf states, with the latter accusing their energy-rich neighbor of sponsoring terrorism and siding with our arch-enemy, Iran. And with the developments this week, the standoff looks to be becoming extended, causing concern for other countries who view the now adversaries as key partners in energy and defense. What could be the costs? Take a look. On June 22nd, Saudi Arabia, together with the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt, cut off diplomatic and transport links with Qatar, handing the wealthy Middle East state a list of demands with a 10-day deadline to meet. At the top of the 13-point list obtained by the Associated Press were demands to curb diplomatic relations with Iran, declare and sever ties with, quote, terrorist organizations, including the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamic State group. It also called on Qatar to shut down the Doha-based Al Jazeera media network, as well as other state-funded news outlets directly or indirectly. That 10-day deadline came and went on Sunday, and even a 3-day extension didn't produce the response the Saudi-led coalition was demanding. Doha instead called the ultimatum a smear campaign meant to designate the energy-rich state as a sponsor of extremist groups.
As the 48 hours extension is coming to an end, Qatar continues to call for dialogue despite the violations of international laws and regulation, despite the separation of 12,000 families, despite the siege that is a clear aggression and an insult to all international treaties, bodies, and jurisdictions.
The response was swift and measured.
There is a political and economic boycott. This will continue until Qatar modifies its policies for the better. We are all hoping for this to happen.
While it remains to be seen what the potential damage of protracted diplomatic standoff will be, there are already signs of wearing. Global credit rating agency Moody's this week downgraded its credit outlook on Qatar from stable to negative, while maintaining its long-term issuer rating at Aa3, its fourth highest investment grade, even as it warned of an increased likelihood of a, quote, prolonged period of uncertainty extending into 2018. The country of 2.2 million people is also the world's wealthiest per capita, while maintaining its status as the globe's largest producer of liquefied natural gas. Eyes will be on how the standoff will affect not only its overseas investments that stretch to Europe, the U.S., and Asia, but also how it will affect the LNG supply worldwide.
Now, this is definitely a story that we'll continue to follow in the weeks and even months to come, as it especially affects commodity prices. Now, let's turn to some news on automobiles. Car maker Volvo has announced that all of its new cars starting 2019 will have an electric motor.
That's absolutely right. 100% new models, and this makes Volvo the first major automaker to announce its planned split from the combustion engine. The now Chinese-owned company said this week it plans to launch 5 fully electric models between 2019 and 2021, as well as hybrid vehicles. It has the goal of selling 1 million EVs by the year 2025. But could this be a sign of things to come? Maybe, but not so fast. Volvo is still seen as a niche player on the global market, with sales just over 500,000 a year, a market share of less than 1%. So the car maker will still push out earlier models with pure combustion engines. And finally, Microsoft has announced a major restructuring plan, and part of it will be the shedding of thousands of sales jobs. The cuts represent less than 10% of the company's sales division, with about 2/3 of the layoffs to come from outside of the United States. This comes as the U.S. software giant is shifting its focus away from software licensing for products like Windows and Office to cloud services like Azure, a product that logged a sales increase of 93% last quarter. A spokesperson from Microsoft said the move is to, quote, align the right resources for the right customer at the right time.
Well, a painful but a necessary action to take, I guess, for a better future.
Here comes technology.
Thank you so much for coming in today.
You bet.
And that wraps it up for today and this week, but we'll be back next week with more of the day's top business stories, so don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching and see you soon.